Hello, this is Jason Casada of Enlight Software, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Broadening the Value of Your ITSM Processes. Just a friendly reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you within 24 hours. There will be an opportunity for a Q&A after the conversation, and the questions can be entered in the chat box located on your GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, so let's get this show on the road. I'd like to introduce Mark Gatos, the CMO of Enlight Software. Mark, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jason. So I'm just going to bring up the first slide here. So thanks again, Jason, and I want to thank everybody for the time you're going to be spending today. Today's going to be sort of a different sort of webinar format. We're basically going to be having a conversation with Rob Neve, who's our CTO and co-founder here at Enlight. He's also responsible for product management here at Enlight. And we've seen a lot of interest from companies in the market who are interested in sort of integrating their data center infrastructure management, or DSIM, into ITSM. They want to take the physical things that are going on at the physical layer in the data center and integrate that into ITSM. A lot of organizations are just basically extending or broadening the scope of ITSM to include the data center because there are so many processes that affect their ability to deliver cost-effective SLAs. And so we're fortunate today to have Rob, but I would like to suggest, I'd like this to be very interactive, and so if you have questions, please feel free to submit them, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. We put in a few slides to sort of prompt conversation, and I'm just going to have Rob do sort of stream of consciousness here and give his thoughts, as Rob is really an expert, comes out of the data center, has a lot of experience with ITSM and with managing the physical layer. So that's really what we're trying to do. So again, I'm going to emphasize to everybody, please give us questions because this is meant to be more interactive, and we're going to try and keep it upbeat and fun and informative. So without further ado, let me first give you sort of a quick overview on Enlight for those of you that aren't familiar. Enlight is the leading company that provides data center infrastructure management software. We help companies really automate the management of what I call physical stuff, right? Racks, servers, cabling, power, all the elements that you need to manage inside a data center. And here's a partial list of some of the companies who use Enlight. And they come from a broad set of industries: financial services, healthcare, consumer products. The thing that all these companies have in common is they want to automate the management of their data center, and they use Enlight to do that, to really streamline, ensure that they're operating at the lowest cost possible in terms of the resources and the personnel that it takes to manage their data centers, but also so they can respond more nimbly and as rapidly as possible to the needs of the business. So managing complex data centers can be very challenging today. There are a lot of components. There are people, there are assets, policies, procedures, resources. There are a lot of moving parts inside a data center. I was just talking to a Gartner analyst yesterday who had come out of the data center, and as he put it, if you haven't been in a data center, you just don't recognize how much is going on in there. It's sort of like the duck on top of the water, right? The duck looks very calm, but the feet are paddling a mile a minute. Well, you look at the data center, it just looks like a building, but there's a lot happening inside that building, making sure everything functions smoothly. So, as I mentioned before, a lot of companies are trying to really broaden the ITSM footprint to include the physical layer, to include the data center. And so I'll turn to Rob here and I'll say, so Rob, at a high level, what does it sort of look like? What are companies really doing in this space when they decide that they want to include sort of the physical layer into their ITSM processes? What do you think?
So there's two areas. There's two parts really on the maturity of the organization in the way that they deliver service inside their organization. So organizations that have recognized the benefits of understanding where everything is from a physical point of view, so where the servers are, how they're connected, how they relate to power and everything else, for service delivery and incident management, those customers who have managed to tie in that physical layer into their CMDB and tie in their CIs, they're seeing the benefits of really not keeping two lists. At a very simple level, having two, rather than having a list within the CMDB of all the assets and all the CIs, and rather than having in the DCIM a list of all the assets and within the environment, they're seeing a single list. By having a single list or single record or related record of truth, they're able to find everything and see everything and then start measuring everything. What this is giving them is the ability to continue the ITSM process, so extend the ITSM process into the data center, but continue that process. So everything they've invested and built with inside the CMDB, everything they've built with inside their change management systems, all unified and extended into the data center. So they're seeing that benefit of a single list.
But doesn't the CMDB already have that information?
It does to a point, right? It does. In the way that a CMDB stores information, a CMDB will say, I have a logical CI for a server, manufacturer model type X. What it doesn't have an understanding is the position or the physical location of that server. So why is that important? How can I capacity plan on the physical footprints or constraints of my data center if I don't understand where everything is? So if I don't understand where they are vertically within inside a cabinet, how can I find it if there's an issue? If I don't understand the growth rates or the impacts of the CIs as they're spawned, what their impact is on the physical environment, i.e. how many more spaces at a very low level, or how much weight am I putting in areas in the data center, as well as how much energy is being drawn in the data center. If I don't have that view, then the CIs will just spawn out of control and separate, and then you end up with the two-list scenario. And the two-list scenario always causes the challenges. So that's where it comes back to that two parts. So the ones who have seen the benefits of tying it into ITSM are starting to see that benefits, that they're not over planning, they're not risking service, they're delivering service faster, and they're more reactive. So there's that way around. Okay. Then there's another area, and they will merge. I'm sure these are going to start coming together closer. There is another group, which is where life begins. Where does life start inside your asset lifecycle? Does the lifecycle of an asset start with inside the CMDB? If you look at the CMDB and the ITSM model, it should start inside there. A record is created, changes were raised, the record's made, everything starts in there and spawns out, and then it's instructed to people to go and physically do something. If, and this is in some organizations, where the ITSM is not fully mature, not fully deployed, it can start in and starts with inside Nlight, where the records are delivered, captured, all the attributes of those records are captured inside Nlight and then pushed into the CMDB. So there is two paths, and it all depends on an organization's lifecycle management and maturity.
Well, so Rob, we got a great question. We appreciate it. So questions have started coming in. I'm just going to toss this one out there. It's sort of, how do you manage the physical assets in the data center? How do you know where servers are, for instance, right? And do we deal with software compliance, right? So it's a, yep, right. So how do you know that information, right? How's that getting into the system?
So the way Nlight works, so Nlight has a number of solutions and tools that come with the kind of binded with the software. So there's an auditing module that you put in the hands of anyone who's making change with inside the environment. So there'll be periodic audits where they'll be checking the environments. There will be lists with inside an organization that doesn't have a DCIM already. There'll be some kind of list of the racks and the servers within those racks. All of that gets imported into Nlight. So you have the physical layout. So you have a model of your environment. Then there are tools with inside Nlight that enable you to maintain that model and the placement and any changes that happen inside that environment. All of that is unified into Nlight. When that's placed and unified in Nlight, that reconciles with a connector that we have to the CMDB, and that reconciles and makes sure the CMDB is in sync with change. Now you have one version of the truth.
Well, maybe this is a good lead into sort of the next slide, which sort of the next slide was right. What is involved with managing the physical layer? Because a lot of folks aren't going to necessarily be this familiar as we right. are, you know, in you being the CTO here, you're obviously very familiar with it, and we've been in business for over 10 years. So what is meant by managing the physical layer? What's really involved?
So if you start, and we look on this slide here, so on the slide, if we look on the right-hand side in the middle there, that's the floor plan. So typically, inside an organization, doesn't matter what one you go in, there will be some type of CAD floor plan design, right, which is the layout of all the racks and the infrastructure. That CAD drawing is another example of a separated tool. That example is just a layout. It keeps everything in, and that's where people can see how many more cabs can I fit on the floor, where is everything physically laid out on the floor. That's one tool that's used. Then the next piece that they have is a list of where are all the servers, where are they placed, which is just above that CAD drawing, which is up on the right there. Where are they positioned inside the racks? And they sometimes have backing lists. What a DCIM does is it combines all of this together. So it's all unified. So when I'm looking at that floor plan, when I click on one of those racks, I'm actually reading the elements within the rack. So I'm getting the top part of that drawing up there on the right-hand side. I'm actually getting the sum of all the values of the space, the power, the networks, everything that's physically in there summed up in a top-down view. What this gives me is you've got the locations of everything, but you've also got the gaps between everything. So you've got the gaps on the floor, right? So how much more can I fit in? How many of these gaps are usable? The gaps within inside the cabinets. How many more things can I fit inside these cabinets? What are the limits? You've also got the gaps within power. So how much power are all these things using? At what rate? For how long? What is the growth rate of the different areas of business? When that is tied to the CMDB and the service, it means I can understand the service that's being delivered to the business or the organization. What does that physically look like, and how much does it physically cost for making change? So who do I need to get involved? And also, what are the ratios, what are the growth rates within each area of the business?
Well, it seems there are other components here, right? Like there's cabling, there's energy, there's workflow. I mean, is there more to it than that? Or?
There is, yeah. When you tie, so because we know the locations of everything, we also know the interrelationships of everything. So for, let's say, for example, a server, we'll know the power connections of the back of the server into the power receptacles in the cabinet and all the way back to the front circuits. So we can tell you what the route is to that power. So what that is, as a very simple high level, if I looked inside Enlight and I said, well, what if I switch this off? What services are affected? We understand that, and we're able to tell you straight away. We're able to say, right, you take off this PDU or you shut down this cabinet, you've lost these servers or these applications. When you tie that to the CMDB, we can tell you you've lost or impacted this service. It's the same in reverse. If you're looking at a service and you have a service that's spread across many boxes inside the environment, across many virtuals, you can see, well, this service sits across this area in the data center. Now, if you do plan change or you want to make an potential impact, you can see exactly the areas of risk. So you can see all the connections from the physical. Tie the networks to that. So we also show you all the network paths. So we show you all the physical cabling paths. So if, for instance, you wanted to look at service or maintenance on a switch, or you wanted to affect a switch, we can tell you all the devices that would potentially be impacted by losing that switch. Or we can also tell you for the storage. If you have storage in racks or storage areas, we can tell you the devices that are associated to those storage devices. So if you lost this storage, this would be the impact. And it's worth pointing out this lower piece on the lower left there. Everything we're doing, because we're a model of a box inside a box and a block and what each block is doing, we're able to capacity manage and show you what the impacts are and what the rate of change is and what you're using. When you can start measuring things, which is well known, right? If you measure things and you know the rate of change, you can predict your future. We can tell you when you're going to run out of things. We can tell you at the rate you're going to run out of things. We can tell you who's going to run those things out, whether it be power, space, or networks, or whatever. We can tell you the business units. Because we can tell you that rate, you can put a cost against that rate, and then you can charge back and turn that into your organization.
Okay, I'm going to time check. We have another 15 minutes. This is a 30-minute webinar, so I want to make sure we keep. So I guess the question becomes, okay, so Enlight manages everything at the physical layer, and this is happening inside the data center. Why does that matter to ITSM? As an ITSM, obviously at a higher level, why do I care what's going on in the data center? It seems to be functioning fine. Why would that be important to tie that into ITSM? Why?
It's because it's a gap that's always been missing, right? There's a real gap inside the ITSM suite. So inside ITSM, they've tied down change, they've got the logical, they've got the, they understand the CIs, but they don't understand the impact of all those CIs, right? So to raise change on something that I have no way of measuring, I don't know its physical impacts, I don't know if it can grow anymore, I don't know if I can add any more to a data center, means that I'm always making a decision based on something that doesn't understand its impacts. What does that mean? It means I'm always impacting service. So, and this is where everything now is service delivery. It's a complete service delivery world. If you don't have a service delivery model inside your business and you're not measuring the service you're delivering, and you're not delivering the optimum service at the optimum price, your business will move out to somewhere else. IT will lose control because people will go to the cloud, they will move out, they will migrate, and things will change. So you have to tie the two together. And the benefits you get, and we see this time and time again in customers, the benefits you get is you are able to deliver a service. So you can't turn away service because you know the growth rates of each area.
So how does it impact, like some of the things that are listed on this slide, right, like capacity planning, asset lifecycle management? Isn't that already being done inside ITSM? Like, why do you need this, right? Like, why do you need...
So if we, look, it's simple as, we'll start from the left and we'll go across the top row. So receiving of equipment. So in some organizations, yes, ITSM has extended into the asset receiving of equipment in deliveries. In the majority of organizations, it hasn't. So what typically happens, equipment gets delivered, it's stuck on the loading bay, that's the delivery area, it gets stuck there, last, no one knows it's arrived, physical people aren't instructed, they're told by a change management system, we're going to implement, I don't know, 100 servers. They don't know when they're going to arrive, they don't know where they've arrived, they have no form to say, well, so-and-so is going to pick them up, unbox them, and put them into this system. It's all done by email or by book. With a DCIM, you have automated tracking. When something comes in, someone can scan it, accept it. There's a workflow that drives down to the physical, every physical attribute, and automatically ties back up to change. So it really does drive that through. So from a life cycle point of view, you know when it started, when it arrived, who accepted it, and who's going to deal with it next. From a capacity management point of view, you know what that physical entity, how big it is, how much power it's going to require, how many networks, how much physical space is going to be taken. Automatically, when you add that block or you plan for that arrival, you're already prepared.
So it seems like all the things on this slide, right, are things that ITSM is interested in, but you're getting more detail, you're fleshing more out of the data center, making those processes more efficient, getting more visibility across all these types of things. And this is obviously not even a comprehensive list, but it seems like to some degree that's the real value, right, is just providing more information and insight into ITSM and making sure that it's aware of everything that's going on and managing those processes. Which sort of takes us into the next question. By the way, again, I'm going to ask everybody who's out there, continue to send in your questions. We're getting quite a few. The more the merrier, and if we can't get to your questions on the webinar, we promise we'll get back to you and get answers via email. The next question really is, doesn't ITIL take care of this? And
yeah, ITIL is a framework, right? So ITIL gives you best practices. ITIL is very strong in the ITSM world, right? ITIL within the data center at the physical layer, and if we imagine it is layers, and we imagine the physical layer is layer 1, that has been ignored, right? It really has been ignored inside the data center because we've been able to get away with it, right? In some organizations, you're able to get away with it because you don't need to worry about it so much because you can just keep on throwing service, keep on throwing power, and keep on delivering a service. In the majority of organizations, you can't get away with not understanding that anymore. So tying the ITSM into the DCIM and bringing ITIL best practices to the data center and measurements and repeatable processes benefits. And that's where it really, ITIL, taking those best practices into the environment, into the physical world, and into everything that's going on inside the data center, that's where the strengths really start to play out.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was talking to this industry analyst the other day who said, in a way, that the data center is sort of the last frontier, that they've sort of been able to operate on their own without being in the ITIL processes often, and that companies are now starting to say, we need to understand what the true cost of delivering the service is, right? We're delivering SLAs, but if we don't know how much it's costing at the physical layer, we haven't incorporated all the costs, right? And so I think a lot of organizations are trying to get that, their arms around that.
Yeah, I mean, the panic of a $50 million to $70 million expense to build a new data center, all of a sudden telling the CFO that you've suddenly got to come up with those, you just can't do that.
Okay. So we sort of talked about, okay, what is the physical layer? How do we manage it, right? How does that sort of tie into ITSM? What types of processes on the ITSM side can be affected by managing your physical layer better? What are sort of the overall benefits? And I guess we have some bullet points here, but from your perspective, what do you think the overall macro benefits are of extending ITSM into the data center?
Starting with the CMDB as the source of truth for all your other systems. So your incident management, change management, areas of the business to understand and have a true record of what's going on inside an organization and what it costs to deliver service. Tie the CMDB to the DCIM and understand what's happening and where things are. It's a huge benefit straight away. At a very, very small level, you have one single version of the truth, everybody working off of one record set. Add to that change, the next layer up, your change system, tie change into DCIM and have change driven through all the physical activities. Now you close that loop. Now you have each change task, each physical thing that has to happen, unbox a server, install a server, add networks, put cards, wire server, whatever, all the different tasks, all those pieces, you now have measurement against all those pieces. When you have measurement, you can put cost. Now you have a total cost of ownership, a TCO, from the point of change to the point of delivery. And that can be adding, moving, or decommissioning. You have everything tracked out.
Okay. But let me go back to why do I care? So the first you said was CMDB. Why do I care if my CMDB doesn't have the necessarily accurate information at the physical layer? Maybe I know it exists. Do I really need to know where it is? Why? I mean, why is it important? Why?
Because if you don't understand what the growth rates are of your business, i.e. you're adding all these services, you're creating all of these new CIs, you're adding all of this new equipment, or you're removing equipment, and you don't understand what that means to the physical world. The physical world, the data center, is a box. You can only put so much in it. You can only take so much out of it. If you don't have that linked into the tool that is driving the change inside your organization that's adding and removing, and you don't have that tied together, you will always have an impact. You will always run out of space. You will always run out over provision power. You will always waste money. You may buy data centers that are too big. You will have many data centers, which is something that a lot of organizations, when they start tying it together, realize we can consolidate. That's what drives a lot of the consolidations. We don't need 50 data centers. We can consolidate them down to 20 or 10 or 2. But when you don't have those tied together, huge losses and over-provisioning. The other piece as well is incident. Simple thing is an incident, i.e. I've lost this service, which means I've impacted these CIs. Where the hell are they? How do I switch them back on? I can't find them. I run into a room that's got 1,000 cabinets in. Which server within this 1,000 cabinets with 40 servers in each cabinet, which one is the broken one?
Right. So you're affecting them, the ability for people to do their jobs efficiently. It just takes more time. And
yeah, there's time lost and impact the service.
Yeah, I mean, as we both know, typically when we go into a company, they're using spreadsheets, right? They're using spreadsheets and Visio drawings to manage literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of assets. And so I think there are definitely efficiencies from a personnel perspective and from resources. We have one company, a financial institution, that's tying us into their asset management is inside PeopleSoft, and they're tying us into PeopleSoft because they had found they had assets that had been decommissioned, but they were still paying service contracts on those assets, which is not very, the CFO really doesn't like paying service contracts on things that don't exist. So
yeah, and
most people aren't happy about that. But
compliance is a huge one as well. I mean, if you take, I think the earlier question, which was around software licensing, if you have a software license agreement and you've bought a license to be used in a certain location, and those physical assets have moved to another location and you've breached your license, you're going to be up for a penalty cost just on those licenses at a very simple level. We know where everything is. We know where it's moved to. Tie that into your asset management. You tie that into the CMDB. You know you've breached a license.
yeah, there's also HIPAA and you know,
and all of these different things. Where is the device? Who uses the device? How is it connected? Where is it? In which country is it in? All of this is found automatically when you tie it into DCIM.
Cool. So time for another question. So we have a question here which basically says, in the end, like, how would I justify this? Right? And I'm going to try and add some color here. Yeah, I guess the question is, you've got the data center that's sort of operating. How can you justify this financially? I'm sort of putting words in the question, but it's a very simple question that came in. But I'm sort of
pick on any one of the areas. So let's pick on capacity management. If you have 10 data centers running and you believe you need all of those 10 data centers to deliver service, and you tie it to a DCIM, and the DCIM ties it to your CIs, and then it looks at the physical capacity and it says, actually, we could reduce this down to 3. Look at all that. You just got rid of 7 data centers. There's a cost saving straight away. If you tie it into your physical attributes and then you look at what applications are, or services are no longer in use, so you've got a load of services running, or according to your ITSM process, are done, finished. They're not in use anymore, but the boxes are still drawing power and drawing cooling inside the room and still requiring management, and you identify all those boxes. You could go into a room, you could get, in a large data center, you could clear probably 10 to 15 cabinets. Get rid of all of those cabinets worth of equipment, recycle all that equipment, re-provision it. You've saved the cost of all those servers. At a very small macro level, the time it takes someone to keep a list up to date in a spreadsheet in line with a list that's happening by another department, you've saved the cost of that person or people doing that work. So there's lots and lots of savings. As the biggest one, incident. Every time there's an incident, if it takes time for you to find the device, to recover the device, or what it means to the business, and that incident is costing you on the seconds huge amounts of dollars, you've saved all of that.
Okay, so we're running out of time. We've got 3 minutes left, and there's a bit of a typo on the slide. My apologies. But I guess the final, you talked to a lot of companies who are integrating into CMDB, into Service Desk, into asset management systems from Enlight. What should an ITSM team be considering when they're incorporating the data center?
When they're loading up the CMDB, so the initial load of the CMDB, they do a discovery product or project, right? So they'll want to find out what the assets are to create the CIs. They should be looking to tie into this DCIM and automatically do that. Bring in, because a DCIM can only work and only understands all the physical layouts and all the devices, it has that visualized, so you can see the gaps straight away. We can pass all of that automatically into a CMDB to build the class libraries out inside the CMDB, to build the class relationships, so the servers inside the blade chassis and everything else, and all the relationships automatically, and save the costs and get the CMDB and the ITSM faster. That's really one of the huge benefits that we're seeing. When you start pumping into a CMDB and you load it automatically and you can validate it quicker, it really does cut down.
So what is your advice there on a macro? Is it to make sure that things are automated, or it's all integrated? That's one piece of advice.
Yeah, it's definitely connect the two. Connect the DCIM to the CMDB so that either the CIs are created from the DCIM to populate, right? Then you turn the connector the other way around, so the CMDB is in charge, and then it pushes the records for creation into the DCIM.
So again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So are you suggesting like the CMDB is a starting point, like that's where you began?
Change starts, CMDB creates the record, that pushes the record through, and everything else follows through the normal change process. That would then create the record inside Enlight or inside the DCIM. What's typically happened is, and what you typically get is, because in some organizations they're still used to using spreadsheets and they're trying it in a transitional phase, and it is a growth phase, all of this is automatic. You've removed the time it takes to plan out a record, choose a record. You've automated everything from the point of delivery.
Okay. Any other advice as companies are thinking about it, like from the workflow perspective?
Yeah. So once you've got, and you have to get the CIs and the assets aligned first. Once you've got those aligned, and it really is a quick process when you tie the connectors together, because it will automatically sync, highlight the issues, highlight the things that need to be done and reconciled. Once they're done, you've got the CIs and assets in sync. Once you've done that, next things change. Change, typically you will have a change corporate process which enables someone to approve, yes, I can have something. When I can have something, there will be a point in there, take action. The take action task gets tied into Enlight, into the DCIM, and then all the tasks that are needed within a particular location for the installation of a server, say. I can have many Enlight workflows different for the installation of server, because there will be slight differences, and this is where in an ITIL, the process is you try it, you measure it, you change it, you try it, you measure it, and change it. With inside change management, you deliver and model one business process so that you can can measure how you're delivering as an organization. When you tie it into end-like, you can then follow ITIL really well by having many different tried processes that can be measured in different locations.
So I'm going to try and squeeze a question in here. We got a question that it's sort of interesting. It says, you guys haven't mentioned service catalog at all.
Yep.
What's the relationship with the service catalog?
Is, and this is where it all does tie into, really. The service catalog is the ITSM model. You're supposed to have your service catalog of what your services are and your delivery models and measurements within inside your business. The catalog will say these are all the things we can deliver or the items that we can choose. This, when you tie it into DCIM, tells you what that means from a physical standpoint. It tells you what the boxes are and then tells you what the measurement is and the usage for delivering that catalog.
So what would be the items in the catalog that relate to DCIM? Like, what, give us an example.
A simple, a very, very high level may be the procurement of a new IT service or servers, or maybe a service is confined of many servers, but let's just break it down to just one to keep it simple, right? So inside my organization, I wish to buy a server to deliver X. In my catalog, I would have server item. That item would be delivering me something within inside my business. When that's tied into DCIM, we know what that something means from a physical standpoint, from space, power, and cooling and network. We know when we add one of those, we know what that means to the business. We can measure all the different attributes. We can deliver it through change, through workflow. We can tell people what to do to install it. You close the loop on the whole thing.
Okay, the last question, I think you sort of hit on and we've gone over, so I'd like to keep it pretty short, which is how does this relate to asset management? Again, maybe we didn't hit on asset management. Yeah. That's why they're asking. Because again, I'm sort of like, you have asset management as part of ITSM. It's sort of a core function.
Yep. So,
we had ITSM in there in one of the slides, so I think that's what's driving this question, right? So
yeah, in some organizations you will have an asset management area, and this again, this is where we can extend asset management. So we can tie into asset management. Asset management will have a list of these are the assets, these are the devices, we can reconcile against those. What we will have is where those devices are physically located, what they are potentially going to be using on power, what they are using on power from a real time, and we'll also have all of their physical relationships and connections.
So as people in the data center are changing these things, it's all getting automatically sent.
Automatically updated inside an asset manager or the CMDB, or both.
Okay. Well, we've gone over. We want to have a 30-minute webinar here, so we've gone over. We haven't got to all the questions, so our apologies for that, but we, as I said, we will get back to everybody and we will answer all the questions we've received that we did not cover here on the webinar. Again, we want to thank you for the time you spent with us. We appreciate it. We hope you all have a great day. Here's the contact information for Rob and myself. We were just discussing Twitter. I'm sort of a Twitter guy. Rob's not a Twitter guy. So we're going to talk Rob into getting a Twitter account here soon enough. So thanks again for everybody joining. If you want to reach out to either of us, that's the contact information. Again, thank you for time, and I think that